Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing fantastic today. Today I'm going to be doing the anti-TBR tag, which I think was originally done by Nicole and her books. I'll link her original tag video below, but basically it's a book tag for all of us to share the books we actually don't really want to read. We share TBR videos all the time for different readathons or by the month, but I guess we don't talk a whole lot about the books that we don't really want to read. I've been seeing a lot of videos by people who are doing this tag and they're like, oh, these are really spicy, unpopular opinions, don't hate me. I've been seeing this tag around and I've been wanting to do it for a while, but I don't know if my opinions are going to be that spicy or that controversial or anything. Or I don't know, maybe I will diss one of your favorite books. I'm not sure. I really don't know if any of my opinions are that divisive or anything. But let's get right to it. Let's talk about some books that are not on my TBR. The first question is a popular book everyone loves that you have no interest in reading. For me, that book is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I know for a while this book was absolutely big in the book world. It was being put in my face on Bookstagram and everyone's TBR video had it. I don't know if it's that popular anymore, but I know that every time I saw it in somebody's TBR, I knew that I was not interested in reading it. So it's supposed to be about a fictional US president's son falling in love with a British prince. So I guess it's supposed to be a cute gay romance in some really tall hypothetical circumstance. And I'm sure it is cute and I'm happy for people who do like it, but the thing is, I don't really have an interest in that sort of romance, let alone a lot of other contemporary romance. To me, it's just a big callback to my Princess Diaries reading days. Does anybody remember Princess Diaries? Yeah, it's just not the sort of book I'm interested in reading. It's not that I really hate the idea or anything, it's just I'm very indifferent to it. Number 2 is a classic book or author you don't have an interest in reading. This one was tough for me because usually I am pretty open to classics. I read a lot of classics for my literature degree in undergrad, and I have really loved a lot of classics recently. So yeah, by and large, I enjoy classics with a few exceptions. So when it comes to classics I don't want to read, I guess the first one that comes to mind for me is Ulysses by James Joyce. I know this is supposed to be basically an epic that's based on the Odyssey, but every time somebody's talked to me about it, of how it's written and what it's about, the characters, it's just not really caught me for some reason. I wouldn't say that I'll never read Ulysses. I'm sure that it is remembered and is considered a great work for a reason. For most books, I kind of have a never say never attitude, but for Ulysses, I know it's very long, and if the subject matter doesn't really interest me, then I'm not really going to prioritize it generally. So we'll see, but for now, probably not reading Ulysses. Number 3 is an author whose books you have no interest in reading. Now that also has a sub-question, a problematic author whose books you have no interest in reading. So I guess you can combine those two if you want. So for me, an author who is also problematic, whom I have no interest in reading, is Cixin Liu. He's known for the book The Three-Body Problem, which has won a lot of Hugo Awards, and also The Wandering Earth. Cixin Liu is problematic because he has come out as a very vocal supporter of the mass Uyghur internment that's going on in China right now. Like, if you read Cixin Liu's comments about the Uyghurs, he basically thinks that the Chinese government interning an entire population and forcing them into labor and forcing women into marriages with Han men and sterilizing some of them, he thinks that is the only alternative to anything else. He thinks all of that is justifiable, and if they didn't do that, then they would just be hacking up bodies in the streets. So his remarks basically reflect really racist and bigoted notions about Uyghurs, that they are just terrorists, that they have to be put through mass incarceration. And some people tried to be understanding about it and be like, oh, well, in order to have a successful career, he has to say things like this. But he doesn't have to be that vocal about it. He doesn't have to be that vehemently supportive of these actions by the CCP. And moreover, just because the Chinese government forces successful figures to support their actions, that actually makes me want to support them even less. Just because an author or an actress might say these things under duress, it doesn't mean you have to give them money. It doesn't mean you have to financially support the system that perpetuates this kind of behavior. In fact, by giving them money, you're helping to perpetuate this kind of behavior and perpetuate the system that takes money from people and then puts it into more mass incarceration, more genocide, more oppression. And also, based on what I know, Cixin Liu's books have a lot of authoritarian ideas in them, so that's something I don't really want to read about. Number 4, an author you have read a couple books from and have decided their books are not for you. For me, easily Sarah J. Maas. I have given Sarah J. Maas many chances. I liked the first 2 books in the Throne of Glass series okay, but then the next 2 or 3 or so, I got so bored with them and I couldn't stand the characters at all. I read the first 2 books in the Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy years ago, and I don't think I was very discerning back then, so I liked them. But then I went back to that series and I read, what was it, A Court of Wings and Ruin. I hated the writing style. I couldn't stand the characters. I couldn't stand the romance. I thought the world building was rubbish. So I've had to come to terms with the fact that I think Sarah J. Maas and I are just not meant to be friends. I don't like her writing style, don't like her characters, don't like her world building. Everyone was raving about that book Crescent City that came out this year. Probably not gonna read it. Next up, a genre you have no interest in, or a genre you tried to get into but couldn't. For me, this is tough because a lot of genres I won't write off the entire genre because there are a lot of subgenres that I like and some that I don't. For this, I'm probably going to say contemporary romance. Like maybe in my younger days I could have, like, I mean, I've read a contemporary YA romance. I mean, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, I do like that series. But generally, contemporary romance, you really have to sell it to me, or it really has to have something else on the table besides the romance. I mean, fantasy romance I can get behind. I mean, Discovery of Witches, I enjoy that series. But I guess I'm not interested in contemporary romance for the same reasons I'm not really interested in rom-coms. Like when I'm watching movies with other people, I will try as hard as I can to get out of watching a rom-com. And that's because I really can't stand a lot of rom-com tropes. I can't stand a lot of the really predictable plot beats. I often get really impatient with the typical romance angst, and it all feels very immature to me at times. So yeah, contemporary romance by itself, can't do it. Number 6, a book you bought but will never read. For me right now, that's probably Circle of Shadows by Evelyn Skye. I got this in a fairy loot box, so technically I did buy it. So this is supposed to be about a pair of trained warriors in an Asian-inspired kingdom, and they stumble upon a band of suspicious characters and they decide to infiltrate it and get involved in a lot of politics and intrigue. So the concept by itself sounded interesting, but then I gave it like 16 pages. I wasn't really caught, not by the world, not really by the characters. Some other side characters looked kind of promising, but overall, it's not hooked me, and I have to confront the fact that I've had this book for 2 years now, or maybe more than that, and I've not read it, so I'm probably not going to read it. Number 7, a series you have no interest in reading, or a series you started and have DNF'd. So I have a couple answers to this. One of them is Throne of Glass. I have not read the last 2 books in that series. I've given that series my level best, and I'm not invested in the story anymore. I can't stand the main characters. I'm not invested in the romances or any of the MacGuffins that they're chasing after. Like I said earlier, I can't stand Sarah J. Maas's writing style, the way she writes characters. She and I just don't get on. And another one that I thought of was The Parasol Protectorate by Gail Carriger. So this series is supposed to be sort of a steampunk series, and the first book is Soulless, which I read. The main character of this series is Alexia, and she has no soul. She's also shunned by her family because of her Italian complexion. And also I think she has a romance with a Scottish werewolf. The concept of this book sounded really fascinating, so I gave it a try, but I was constantly infuriated by how much of the focus of this book was on the romance. And by itself, the romance wouldn't be so bad, but I felt like all of her dialogue with her love interest was just so cartoonish, like a parody. And that's what this whole book felt like to me. It was just a parody of steampunk and Victoriana. It was all just caricatures, and I couldn't take any of the characters seriously. And most of all, that romance that took up so much of the book, I could not stand it at all. So yeah, I'm probably not finishing that series. I do know that Gail Carriger has other series that are out that are similarly steampunk, so if any of them are an improvement on this series, please let me know. I love steampunk, I love the steampunk aesthetic, but honestly, it's so hard for me to find a book that does steampunk really well. And finally, a new release you have no interest in reading. For me, that is Midnight Sun by Stephenie Meyer. This is basically Twilight, but from Edward's perspective. I was already really iffy about this book when I heard it was coming out, and I heard a review on the Overdue podcast, which I listened to, and one of the guys described it as swimming in molasses, which was not a flattering review. Like, I've already read Twilight, I know what happens, so I don't need to reread what happens if it's not going to innovate on what Stephenie Meyer already wrote. And from what I know, it doesn't provide us with a whole lot of insight into Edward. It doesn't really give us a whole lot of deleted scenes, so to speak. So yeah, I'm probably never going to read Midnight Sun. It just doesn't catch me at all. I've already experienced that story, and I don't really want to read something that will give me the same thing with a slightly different perspective if it's not going to innovate on the source material. So those are my responses to the anti-TBR tag. Let me know down below your responses to my answers, I guess, and maybe what books you're not going to ever read. Please subscribe to my channel if you like my content. I am about 108 subscribers away from 2,000, so that would be awesome for me to reach that goal before the new year. And of course, like this video if you liked it, and in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter and Goodreads and Instagram, and I will see you in my next video.